This is Garis, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 494, entitled "Masculists are angrier at women than feminists are at men." Description. This flyer states that masculists are angry at women than feminists are at men because women oppress men far worse than vice versa, with their decades-lasting man-slavery of men, by not bothering to fip up, living off his money and labour for decades, making her a hated, fluffy, manslaving parasite. Masculists have an even greater hatred for fluffy feminists who control the divorce courts, with their hypocrisy and indirect genocide, which are major gender crimes against men and humanity. Masculists are becoming increasingly angry and hateful by the month, and lash out publicly to an ever greater extent. Now the flyer itself. Masculists are angrier at women than feminists are at men. By Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Masculists are angrier at women than feminists are at men for one simple reason, and that is that women oppress men far worse than vice versa. So we men, we masculists, have plenty of good reason to be very, very angry at women. For example, even rape, in brackets, which is one of the worst ways that men oppress women, close brackets, is small beer in comparison to fluffies' decades-long man-slavery of men, which so enrages masculists that it is a war issue to them that will eventually get manslaving fluffy parasite vermin killed in a sex war, if things get to that stage. To have one's masculist consciousness raised means essentially to see fluffydom as manslavery, and manslavery as slavery, and hence hated and a war issue. A fluffie is a masculist term based on the word fluff for a traditional woman who expects to be able to live off the labour and money of a man, making no real effort to fip up, in brackets, FIP, F-I-P, equals financially independent person, close brackets, so that she shares equally the burden of earning the living with men, and does not, fluffy style, think that by merely wiggling her twat at a man, she can get him to work for her, thus manslaving him for decades. The core idea of masculism is that it is a rebellion by men against being manslaves to women, working for women for decades of a man's life, thus manslaving him for decades, a huge gender crime committed by women against men, and is thus strongly hated by the masculists, which is why masculists are at war against fluffies, aiming to wipe them out, to exterminate them slowly, by punishing them severely, by forcing them to not get a man, as masculist ideas spread across the planet, waking up millions, later billions of men, that they no longer need to pay the horrible traditional price of being a manslave to a parasitic female just to get a bit of sex from her once in a blue moon. Masculists have very strong reasons to be very angry at women, at fluffies, since it was men who liberated women from household drudgery by giving women science-based medicine, hence a female life expectancy of 85 years, the contraceptive pill, household gadgets, higher education, etc. So that in the modern world, women typically have 0, 1 or 2 kids in most cases. So even those women who have their 2 kids still have a career window of half a century. So the masculists are standing up, pointing their fingers at women, telling them that, quote, "Now that women can work, they must work. Anything else is manslavery, and manslavery will get you killed in a sex war if things get bad enough. You women have a powerful moral obligation to get off your fat parasitic asses and fip up, or you'll be severely punished by men, in brackets, by masculistic men, who will be most men in time, close brackets, by being forced to rot on the shelf, by being manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at by men who absolutely refuse to be manslaved by a hated, callous, manslaving, bloody fluffie, the type of woman who masculists spit at, expressing their utter hatred and contempt for what she is doing, or rather what she is not doing. Namely, she is not fipping up, not bothering to get a career-competent education that will allow her to be a true fip as an adult, pulling her financial weight and not expecting fluffy style to be able to parasite off the money and labour of a man, thus manslaving him, having him work for her for no financial reward, which is the very definition of slavery. Masculists are at war with fluffies. Our strategy is first to raise awareness amongst men that their traditional male role of being a manslave to a woman is no longer needed. It was needed a century or more ago, when the husband and wife, the father and the mother, worked on the farm, and both were fully occupied, with him doing the heavy work in the fields and she the light work around the house. Both sexes in those days were busy, fully occupied from dawn till dusk with farming chores. Women pull their financial weight in those days, but those days are now long gone. With the pill and household gadgets, women now have time on their hands, especially if they have 0, 1 or 2 kids, as most women nowadays do. So there needs to be a fundamental redistribution of the burden of earning the living amongst the sexes. So in practice, that means that women's self-conception needs to change, and that is that women need to see themselves primarily as careerists. Since even if a woman has her 2 kids, she still has a career window of half a century. So she has a powerful moral obligation to get off her fat parasitic ass and fip up. Parents and teachers need to socialise and educate young women to become fips. Young men will be increasingly influenced by masculinist ideas and expectations, and then apply enormous moral pressure on young women at high school to fip up, or be brutally rejected, both socially and sexually, by her male classmates, who will hurl labels at her, in brackets, for example, fluffy parasite, manslaving vermin, soft option sloth, etc. If she has a reputation of being a fluffy, by having chosen to study fluffy crap majors, that will force her to become a fluffy as an adult, who then tries to sexually trap some gullible, stupid, ignorant, manslavable man and have him work for her for decades of his life. Unfortunately for her, the supply of such manslavable men is seriously drying up, as most young men in Western countries are now very aware that it is very much not in their self-interest to have a relationship with a bloody, manslaving, vermin fluffy. These men may pump and dump her, especially if she is pretty and sexy, but they won't have a serious relationship with her because they see her for what she is, a despised, manslaving, fluffy parasite, the type of woman that these young men spit at, hate, and leave rotting on the shelf, shunned, rejected, pariahed, excluded from the core of society, seen as a persona very non grata, to be spat at. One of the major political goals of the Masculists is the creation of a FIP society, that is, one in which all adults are FIPs, with no expectation that one sex will parasite off the other, by having both sexes bother to get career competent educations, by bothering to FIP up, and feel the moral obligation to FIP up, that is, by being emo, that's EMO, FIPs, that's equal moral obligations, FIPs. That is, women who simply expect that they will be FIPs, since anything else is to be a manslaver, and that will become increasingly dangerous in the coming years as men, millions of them, become increasingly hostile and violent towards fluffy, manslaving parasites. Of course, a certain level of compromise needs to be made when women are raising small children, which has to happen, since if not, then whole populations get wiped out due to the birth rate crash, as is now happening around the world, particularly in South Korea, which has the world's lowest birth rate of only 0.92 children per woman. This is the end of part 1.